The morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the little cafe at the corner of Willow Street, draping the polished wooden tables in a golden glow. Steam curled upward from freshly brewed coffees, mingling with the delicate scent of pastries cooling in the glass display. The air was warm with chatter and the soft clinking of cutlery on plates. Outside, the city thrummed to life, but inside, this cafe was a cocoon, a sanctuary of gentle noises and unhurried moments. Ethan Montgomery pushed open the heavy wooden door, his hand firmly clasping the tiny, delicate hand of his daughter. The door chimed softly, signaling their arrival, and a few heads lifted, curious at the sight of the impeccably dressed man in a tailored navy blue suit. His presence was unmistakable: broad shoulders, precise posture, and an air of command that suggested wealth and power beyond imagination. Yet in the same instant there was a softness in his eyes as they fell on the small figure beside him. Lily Montgomery, a little girl no older than 6, clutched her father's hand with a grip that betrayed both excitement and trust. Her dark curls bounced slightly as she looked around the cafe, her large brown eyes absorbing every detail. The way sunlight touched the edges of the counter, the colorful muffins lined like jewels in the display, the shimmer of the metal espresso machine as it hissed and steamed. She could not hear the hum of conversation or the clinking cups, but she felt the vibrations, the rhythm of life vibrating through the floor, through the air, through her small body. For Lily, this cafe was a playground of senses beyond sound. "Do you like it, sweetheart?" Ethan asked softly, bending down so his lips were close enough for her to read. His voice was gentle, unpracticed in this realm of tenderness, yet full of unwavering devotion. He had spent countless hours trying to learn sign language, his hands moving in stiff, precise motions that lacked the natural grace Lily's world demanded. Still, he persisted, because she was everything. Lily's response was a giggle, her small hands moving quickly as she signed back, her gestures fluid, practiced, and full of joy. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly as he tried to follow her movements. Despite all the tutors, all the classes, and all his disciplined effort, he felt clumsy, inadequate. Money could buy many things, but not this. This seamless, unspoken connection between parent and child in the language of her world. He looked around the cafe, a mixture of pride and subtle anxiety tightening his chest. Other patrons watched them with polite curiosity, some whispering under their breath, enchanted by the unusual sight of such a distinguished man leaning down to meet a child's pace so carefully. He noticed the baker arranging a tray of croissants and muffins, the barista polishing glasses behind the counter, and the little girl in a corner playgrounding with her coloring book. The mundane beauty of the cafe contrasted sharply with the high-stakes world Ethan inhabited outside: boardrooms, deadlines, and billion-dollar decisions. Here, everything was simple, safe, human. Lily's fingers tapped at the glass display case, eyes widening at the rainbow of cupcakes and croissants lined neatly on the top shelf. She pressed a small hand to the glass, almost bouncing in place with excitement. Ethan followed her gaze and, with a soft smile, signed the words he had so painstakingly practiced. "Which one do you want, darling?" She looked up at him, a mixture of affection and amusement in her eyes, and signed back a string of gestures he struggled to interpret. He tried his best, moving his hands in calculated motions, yet every attempt fell slightly short of her natural grace. For a man who controlled entire industries with his mind, who could bend markets and competitors alike, This moment, was a humbling reminder of the limitations of even vast power. As Ethan concentrated, a gentle voice broke through the rhythmic clatter of the cafe. "Would you like me to help?" Ethan's head snapped up, instincts as a guarded businessman kicking in. His eyes scanned the counter, landing on a young woman whose presence seemed to soften the very air around her. Hair loosely tied in a bun, a simple apron tied neatly around her waist, and a smile that seemed to radiate warmth beyond the need for words. Her name tag read, Clara. She bent slightly toward Lily, her hands lifting effortlessly into motion. The gestures were fluid, practiced, yet gentle, language alive in connection, not in discipline. Lily's eyes widened, sparkling with surprise and delight. She responded immediately, her hands flying across the space between them in joyous exchange. A burst of laughter, silent but radiant, spilled from her, and her small shoulders shook with the delight of a world suddenly unlocked. Ethan froze. The usual confidence, the poise he carried through negotiations and media appearances, faltered. He watched as the two communicated, fully immersed in each other's language, and felt a pang of emotion so sharp it stole his breath. Here, at the heart of a cafe filled with ordinary lives, he felt invisible. For the first time, wealth and influence seemed hollow, irrelevant in the face of this raw human connection. The world he built, mansions, investments, yachts, headlines, could not reach this. This was beyond his control, beyond the reach of his carefully honed power. And yet, as he watched, an unfamiliar feeling unfurled inside him. Gratitude, uncontainable and unrefined. He was thankful, not for money or status, but for this woman who had entered their lives at this precise moment, offering his daughter something he could not. Clara knelt slightly, lowering herself to Lily's eye level, signing as though their world had always been shared. Lily's hands moved eagerly, pointing at a cupcake sprinkled with vibrant colors. The little girl's joy radiated outward, unnoticed by all but a few attentive eyes in the cafe. The moment seemed to stretch, suspended between ordinary and extraordinary, the kind of instant that imprints itself in memory forever. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He had faced CEOs, investors, and billion-dollar negotiations without flinching. But here, in the warmth of a sunlit cafe, in the presence of this kind stranger who could touch his daughter's heart effortlessly, he was shaken. Emotion, unbidden and unstoppable, threatened to overwhelm him. Clara glanced briefly at Ethan, her eyes soft but steady. "I grew up signing with my younger brother," she said quietly, still moving her hands fluidly for Lily's sake. "He was deaf. Even after he passed, I kept signing. It's a part of me now." The word struck Ethan in a way no contract, no headline, no boardroom victory ever could. The human element of love, grief, and connection resonated deeper than any fortune could. He felt tears gather at the edge of his eyes, not from sorrow, but from recognition of something infinitely precious, the bridge his daughter had longed for, the connection that had seemed impossible. Lily tugged on his sleeve, signing excitedly, pointing at Clara, pleading in gestures that needed no words. She wanted to stay, to interact, to repeat the joy she had discovered. Ethan's lips curved into a small, faint smile, though inside a storm raged. For years he had worried about Lily's isolation, her future, her ability to belong in a world that rarely stopped to understand her. Yet in this unassuming cafe, he witnessed the fulfillment of a silent prayer. The other patrons began to notice, some whispering quietly, their faces touched with curiosity and wonder. A little old man sipping coffee shook his head in awe. A young mother looked on, her own child gripping a coloring book. Momentarily distracted by the miracle unfolding at the counter, Ethan's gaze remained fixed on Clara and Lily. A mix of admiration, vulnerability, and hope coursing through him. He had known the world as a place of calculation, where influence and power dictated outcomes. Here he was powerless, and it felt extraordinary. And in that moment, as Lily laughed silently and Clara continued signing with effortless grace, Ethan understood a truth that wealth had never taught him. Some of life's most profound gifts come not from what you own, but from who you allow into your heart. The cafe's golden morning sunlight fell across them, warm and unwavering, highlighting the faces of father and daughter, of stranger and newfound friend. For Ethan Montgomery, billionaire and master of worlds, this was a lesson worth more than every fortune he had ever amassed. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, something that would change not just Lily's life, but his own, something that no contract or deal could ever replicate. And as Clara signed another phrase, and Lily's eyes lit up with joy, Ethan knew that nothing in his world would ever feel the same again. The cafe hummed with the gentle rhythm of morning life. But for Ethan, the world seemed to narrow into a small square of polished wood. Sunlight and the tiny hand of his daughter. Lily's excitement was palpable, her fingers tapping on the glass display case as she inspected the pastries with wonder. She bounced lightly on her heels, unable to contain the delight that shone through her brown eyes. Ethan smiled, bending down to her level, hands raised in the carefully memorized motions of sign language. He pointed at the muffins, then at Lily, his brows furrowed in concentration. "Which one do you want?" He signed, his movements deliberate, almost stiff. He had practiced this dozens of times at home, in front of mirrors, in the quiet of his office, away from the scrutiny of his daughter. But Lily's response was a blur of hands and energy, fluid and natural, each gesture flowing with an ease that reminded him just how far he still had to go. His brow furrowed, frustration tugging at the corners of his composure. He tried again, slower this time, mimicking the gestures he had memorized, but it felt mechanical, lifeless, and beneath the vibrant energy that Lily radiated. She paused for a moment, looking up at him with a small, almost teasing smile. Then, with a quick flick of her tiny hands, she signed a word he didn't understand. Ethan's throat tightened. "She's right there, and yet I can't reach her." Around them, life went on. A couple sipped cappuccinos, unaware of the quiet struggle unfolding at the corner of the cafe. The barista wiped down the counter, the scent of fresh espresso mingling with the golden glow of the morning sun. Ethan's suit, expensive and tailored, seemed almost out of place among the casual warmth of the cafe. He was a man who could command the attention of entire rooms with a glance. Yet here he felt small, inadequate, powerless. Lily's tiny hand tugged at his sleeve, her gestures urging him to try again. Ethan inhaled deeply, hands moving once more. This time his fingers faltered. The words he wanted to express, the love and patience he carried in his heart, seemed trapped in the rigid motions of his hands. Lily tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but insistent. She wanted to communicate with him, to share the joy she felt, but the barrier between them stretched wider with every failed attempt. The tension built, almost tangible in the sunlit cafe. Ethan felt eyes on him, subtle glances from other patrons who sensed the struggle, even if they could not understand it fully. He caught a young mother watching, her own child perched in a high chair, her gaze curious but kind. A businessman in the corner paused, cup halfway to his lips, eyebrows raised in silent observation. No one spoke, but the unspoken pressure of being watched made the weight of his inability feel heavier. He set his hands down for a moment, letting out a soft sigh that went unnoticed except by Lily, whose eyes reflected a mix of patience and disappointment. Ethan's chest tightened. He had conquered empires, outmaneuvered competitors, and negotiated billion-dollar deals, but none of that experience could prepare him for this, failing to communicate with his own child in her language. Lily's gaze drifted back to the pastries. Her small fingers hovered over a cupcake adorned with rainbow sprinkles, her excitement palpable. Ethan pointed again, his movement stiff, and tried to form the words in her language, but each attempt fell short. He watched her tiny hands move gracefully, almost dancing in front of him, signing with ease, and felt a wave of helplessness crash over him. "Daddy," he murmured softly, his voice almost breaking the silence between the murmurs of the cafe. I'm trying." She looked at him, eyes wide, and signed something he didn't recognize, then pointed to the display again. The moment stretched painfully. Ethan's pride, carefully cultivated over decades, felt exposed. Here, in the warmth of a cafe, in front of strangers, his mastery of the world outside meant nothing. He was just a father who wanted to connect. Then, as if the universe had decided to intervene, a soft sound cut through the rhythmic hum of the cafe, the gentle shuffle of footsteps behind the counter. Ethan turned sharply, instincts flaring, ready to assert control as he would in any boardroom. But the figure he saw made him pause. A young woman approached, her posture relaxed, her smile warm and inviting. She wore a simple apron, hair loosely tied in a bun, and radiated an air of quiet confidence. Her name tag read Clara. She didn't hesitate. She didn't wait for permission. She looked at Lily, then lifted her hands, moving with a grace and fluency that immediately caught Lily's attention. The little girl's eyes lit up, recognition and joy flashing across her face. Hands flew through the air, gestures rapid and natural. Lily laughed softly, clapping her small hands together in delight. Ethan stood frozen, his own hands still at his sides, unsure how to intervene. Who is this? How can she? The thought raced through his mind, interrupted by the pure joy radiating from his daughter. Ethan's chest tightened, not with jealousy but with awe. In the hands of this stranger, Lily had found the connection he had struggled to provide despite years of effort. Around them, a few cafe patrons noticed the change. Heads turned, eyes widening slightly. The atmosphere shifted subtly. The ordinary cafe had become the stage for an extraordinary moment of connection. Some whispered under their breath, some simply watched, captivated by the silent language that carried more weight than any words. Ethan felt his control slipping. But for the first time in years, he didn't resist. He wanted this. He wanted Lily to feel understood, to feel joy, to feel free. And Clara, with her gentle gestures and fluent hands, was giving him exactly that. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. She was a stranger, and yet she had unlocked something priceless. All my wealth, my power, my influence, none of it could give her this. The realization was humbling, almost painful, but also profoundly moving. Clara continued signing, patiently, lovingly, her hands never faltering as she guided Lily to the cupcake she had chosen. Lily clapped her hands in delight, the silent laughter of a child echoing in the golden morning light. The scene was simple, yet astonishing: a billionaire father, a little girl, and a cafe worker communicating in a language that transcended money, status, and ordinary understanding. Ethan's gaze softened, and for the first time that morning, he allowed himself to relax. He didn't know how long this moment would last, but he understood its significance immediately. His daughter had found someone who spoke her world fluently, who could connect with her in ways he had only dreamed of. The cafe's background faded slightly in his perception. The clinking cups, the aroma of coffee, the rustle of pastries, all became part of a larger, almost sacred scene. Here, in this ordinary setting, he witnessed something extraordinary. A bridge had been built between his daughter and the world she deserved to inhabit. Ethan's heart pounded with gratitude, awe, and a subtle hint of fear. This was just the beginning. He didn't know who Clara truly was, but he knew that whatever role she would play in their lives, it would be monumental. For the first time that morning, he allowed himself to hope, not for wealth, power, or influence, but for something far more precious: genuine human connection, and the possibility that Lily's world could be filled with joy, understanding, and love beyond measure. The cafe seemed to pause for a heartbeat as Clara knelt before Lily, her hands moving in a rhythm that was effortless and alive. Each gesture was precise yet fluid, more a dance than an exercise. Lily's eyes widened, sparkling with delight as she mirrored Clara's signs, her tiny fingers flying with joy. It was as if a hidden world, previously locked away, had suddenly swung open its doors. Ethan stood frozen a few steps behind them, the golden sunlight falling across his sharp suit, highlighting the tension etched on his face. He had seen children laugh, seen them play, even seen them interact with strangers. But he had never witnessed anything like this. The sheer, unbridled joy of connection between two people speaking a language invisible to the majority of the room. Lily's giggles, silent to everyone else, felt like music to Ethan's ears. He watched as Clara guided her tiny hands toward a cupcake topped with rainbow sprinkles, encouraging her to choose with subtle, expressive gestures. Every motion was confident, natural, and imbued with warmth. Lily's response was immediate, a flurry of energetic signing and clapping, her excitement radiating like sunlight. Ethan's chest tightened, a strange cocktail of emotions swirling inside him: awe, relief, gratitude, and an unexpected pang of inadequacy. He had always been the master of control, boardrooms bent to his will, markets shifted under his gaze. But here, in the corner of a humble cafe, he was powerless. Powerless to give Lily what she had just found in Clara: understanding, fluency, and a bridge to the world she deserved. "Daddy, look." Lily signed excitedly, pointing at Clara. Her tiny hands flew rapidly, the message clear and urgent: "She understands me. She knows my world." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight. He tried to respond, signing slowly, carefully, but his movements felt rigid, almost awkward compared to the effortless flow between the two girls. He realized then that no amount of wealth, no hours of study, and no personal effort could replicate the gift Clara had offered. Clara looked up briefly at Ethan, her eyes calm, compassionate, and steady. "I grew up signing with my younger brother," she said softly, still moving her hands for Lily's sake. "Even after he passed, I never stopped. It's just part of who I am now." Her voice was quiet, but each word carried depth, a lifetime of experience and a quiet reverence for connection. Ethan's gaze softened. He had always believed that money could solve everything, that influence could bend circumstances to his will. But standing there, watching Clara's hands and Lily's radiant response, he realized he had been wrong. True connection could not be bought. It had to be given freely, with understanding and empathy. Around them, the cafe buzzed softly with life, yet the golden sunlight seemed to draw a spotlight around the small trio. A few patrons glanced over, sensing something extraordinary. A mother with a toddler paused mid-bite of a croissant. An elderly couple in the corner exchanged a look of quiet astonishment. Even the barista behind the espresso machine seemed caught in the subtle awe of witnessing something rare and profound. Lily's excitement grew. She signed rapidly, her gestures animated and joyful, pointing at the cupcakes again and then at Clara, as if to say, "This is amazing." "Let's do it together," Clara responded with gentle encouragement, guiding Lily's hands to the chosen pastry, her movements patient, reassuring, and infused with warmth. Ethan's mind raced. He had imagined a perfect life for Lily, one where she would never feel isolated, where he could protect her from every cruelty the world might inflict. He had purchased tutors, specialists, and even technology to bridge the gap her deafness created. But all of it, he realized, paled in comparison to what Clara offered naturally: human understanding. He stepped forward tentatively, his polished shoes silent on the wooden floor. Where did you learn to sign?" he asked, his voice lower than usual, betraying the emotions he tried to conceal behind his composed facade. Clara smiled faintly, her hands never stopping their gentle dance for Lily. "From love," she said simply. "My younger brother. He was deaf. I grew up with him, signing every day. Even after he passed, it stayed with me. I never forgot." Her eyes flickered with a shadow of grief, quickly replaced by a warmth reserved solely for Lily. Ethan's throat tightened further. He had faced adversaries who tried to exploit weaknesses, investors who attempted to bend him, even journalists who dissected his every move. And yet none of those encounters had left him this exposed, this moved. It was not power, wealth, or influence that made him feel this way. It was witnessing someone else offer his daughter a gift he could not. Lily tugged at his sleeve, signing excitedly. "She's so nice. She understands me. I want to come here every day." Ethan's lips curved into a faint, almost hesitant smile. He nodded slowly, absorbing the scene, allowing himself to be fully present. "Thank you," he said quietly, not fully aware that he was speaking aloud. Clara's hands paused for a moment, acknowledging the words without breaking her connection to Lily. The little girl clapped her hands together, delighted, and pointed at the cupcakes again. Clara guided her, hands moving in a gentle rhythm, signing encouragement and praise. Lily's joy was infectious, spilling over into the cafe, unnoticed by some but captivating for those who chose to look. Ethan's heart swelled. He had spent decades accumulating wealth, building an empire. Yet here, he realized, he had encountered something infinitely more valuable, a genuine human connection that transcended money, power, and status. Clara had given Lily more than communication. She had given her a sense of belonging, understanding, and joy. For a few quiet moments, father and daughter and this extraordinary stranger existed in a bubble apart from the world. Ethan watched Lily laugh silently, her hands flying in a language he still struggled to master. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine a future where Lily was not limited by her deafness, where she could thrive fully and freely around them. The cafe's ordinary rhythm resumed, but for Ethan, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. He understood the significance of this encounter in a way that no business deal, no acquisition, no headline ever could. This small act of kindness, this fluent gift of language and empathy, had shifted the balance of his world. Lily's laughter grew louder in her silent, expressive way, and Ethan finally allowed himself to take a deep breath. He had watched Clara give his daughter something priceless, and in doing so, had taught him a lesson no amount of money could buy, that the most profound transformations come from love, empathy, and human connection. And as he stood there, observing the effortless grace with which Clara signed and Lily responded, he knew, without a shadow of doubt, that life had just offered him a glimpse of something extraordinary, something that would change them all forever. The cafe hummed with quiet activity, but for Ethan the world had narrowed to a single corner, where his daughter and the young woman signing effortlessly before her were engaged in a language he had spent years struggling to master. Every gesture, every motion, every tiny flick of Lily's fingers seemed to pierce through the layers of control he had spent a lifetime cultivating. Ethan's hands hung awkwardly at his sides, the rigid motions of sign language he had practiced feeling clumsy and mechanical compared to the natural flow of Clara's hands. His mind raced, his chest tightening with an emotion that was both overwhelming and humbling. Gratitude, astonishment, a raw, aching vulnerability that he rarely allowed himself to feel. Clara's fingers moved with grace, guiding Lily toward a small cupcake covered in colorful sprinkles. Lily's hands responded in perfect synchrony, the joy of understanding radiating from her tiny body like sunlight. She laughed silently, clapping her hands together in delight, her eyes sparkling with uncontainable happiness. Ethan's throat tightened, and he found himself unable to look away. Around them, a few patrons had begun to notice the extraordinary scene unfolding. An elderly couple in the corner exchanged quiet smiles, their eyes misty with unspoken recognition of the beauty of the moment. A young mother, her own child tucked in a high chair, paused mid-bite of a croissant, captivated by the connection she was witnessing. Even the barista, usually focused on steaming milk and polishing glasses, watched silently, her hands frozen over the counter. Ethan's usual control, the unshakable composure that had earned him a reputation as a formidable billionaire, was gone. It was replaced by something far more human, awe. He had built empires, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and commanded rooms full of influential people. Yet none of that had prepared him for this, the simple, profound, unforced connection between his daughter and this extraordinary young woman. He swallowed hard, attempting to gather himself, but every glance at Lily's radiant face reminded him of what he could not provide alone. He had devoted his life to ensuring her safety, her comfort, and her opportunities. But here, in this quiet cafe corner, he realized the limits of wealth and power. He could buy tutors, specialized technology, and private lessons, but he could not buy this effortless, joyous understanding. Clara glanced up at Ethan briefly, her eyes calm, steady, and warm. "She's amazing," she signed for Lily, and then spoke softly to Ethan. "I've always believed that connection is the most important gift we can give." "Money can't replace it." Ethan's chest tightened. Her words were simple, but they struck him like a thunderclap. He had never thought of it this way. Not in boardrooms, not in the press, not in the quiet of his office late at night. Money could build walls, buy luxury, and influence power, but it could not reach the heart of a child. Only human empathy, patience, and love could do that. Lily tugged at his sleeve, signing rapidly, clearly trying to convey something urgent and happy. "She's wonderful. She understands me. Can we come back again?" Ethan nodded slowly, feeling a wave of gratitude that almost brought tears to his eyes. He realized, in that moment, that Clara had not just offered Lily the ability to communicate in her own language. She had offered her something far greater: validation, joy, and inclusion. She had built a bridge that no amount of wealth could construct, and she had done so freely, without expectation, without obligation, with nothing but care and understanding in her heart. Ethan felt the stirrings of humility, a sensation he was not accustomed to. In the boardroom, he had commanded respect, but here he felt only reverence, for Clara, for Lily, for the simplicity and profundity of human connection. His daughter's laughter, radiant and unrestrained, filled him with an emotion he had long suppressed. Hope. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel powerless, and he welcomed it. It was a strange, liberating sensation. He had been so focused on providing for Lily in every material sense that he had overlooked the simplest, most essential gifts: understanding, empathy, and companionship. Clara had reminded him that love was not measured in dollars, but in attention, patience, and the willingness to enter another's world. He looked around again, noticing the subtle reactions of the patrons. The cafe was ordinary, yet it had become a stage for something extraordinary. People were not just watching, they were witnessing a miracle of human connection. Their curiosity and quiet admiration only reinforced Ethan's awareness of the significance of this moment. Clara continued to interact with Lily, her hands never faltering, her expressions gentle, her voice soft when necessary. Each gesture communicated warmth, encouragement, and joy. Lily's responses were immediate, animated, and unrestrained. She clapped, bounced lightly, and signed rapidly, unable to contain the happiness of being fully understood. Ethan's heart swelled. He realized he had been chasing the wrong markers of success. Wealth, power, influence, they were hollow without connection. Here, in a cafe filled with ordinary people, he had witnessed the most extraordinary lesson, that the heart, not the bank account, defines true success. He took a small, tentative step closer, unsure of how to engage without intruding. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice trembling slightly despite his best effort to remain composed. Clara's eyes met his, serene and understanding, and she simply nodded, continuing her interaction with Lily, as if his gratitude had been acknowledged in the silence between them. The moment stretched, golden and warm as father and daughter, and this remarkable stranger existed in a bubble of joy and understanding. Ethan knew that their lives had been irrevocably changed. Lily had found someone who could speak her language, both literally and figuratively, and he had been reminded of the deepest truth. The things that matter most cannot be bought, only given. The cafe resumed its rhythm, but for Ethan, nothing would feel ordinary again. Every sound, every smile, every gesture of kindness resonated more deeply than ever before. He watched Clara and Lily, their hands moving in seamless communication, and knew that he had witnessed something rare, precious and life-altering. For Ethan Montgomery, billionaire and master of worlds, this was more than a lesson. It was a revelation, and in that quiet, sunlit cafe, surrounded by the ordinary beauty of everyday life, he allowed himself to feel something he rarely did: complete and overwhelming gratitude. The golden morning light continued to pour through the cafe's windows, painting every surface with warmth. The aroma of fresh coffee and baked pastries mingled with the subtle scent of vanilla from the cupcakes. But for Ethan, none of the sensory details mattered quite as much as the scene unfolding before him. Lily, animated and radiant, signing effortlessly with Clara, their hands moving in perfect harmony. Lily's laughter, silent yet expressive, filled the corner of the cafe with an energy that made Ethan's chest ache with both pride and longing. She pointed at another cupcake, then a muffin, signing rapidly as if to say, "I want them all." "Can we try them together?" Clara's hands guided her patiently, encouraging her with gentle gestures and smiles. Every movement was deliberate, yet natural, a dance of empathy and understanding. Ethan watched, captivated. He realized that this simple act, choosing a pastry with a stranger, was more than just a moment of joy. It was a lesson in connection, trust, and human kindness. He had spent years protecting his daughter, shielding her from the world's cruelty, striving to give her everything money could buy. Yet, despite all his efforts, he had never been able to give her this: the pure joy of feeling understood, the unguarded delight of being fully seen. Lily tugged at his sleeve, signing rapidly, eyes sparkling. Ethan tried to respond, but his gestures remained clumsy, mechanical. Clara noticed and smiled softly, a reassuring, almost motherly warmth in her expression. She adjusted her hands slightly, subtly inviting Ethan into their shared language, a silent offering of guidance without condescension. For a long moment, he simply watched, feeling the stirrings of humility. He had always been in control: boardrooms, markets, negotiations. He could bend situations to his will, influence outcomes, and command respect. But here, in a sunlit cafe filled with the ordinary rhythm of life, he had encountered something he could not command, control, or purchase. He had encountered connection. Clara's fluency and patience with Lily highlighted everything he had struggled to provide. And yet, rather than resentment, he felt gratitude. Gratitude that someone could offer his daughter what he could not, and that she had done so selflessly, without expectation or obligation. He realized that this was what true care looked like. Not effort for show, not achievement for recognition, but simple, genuine understanding. Lily clapped her hands together and signed eagerly. "Can we come back tomorrow?" "Please?" Her tiny fingers moved so quickly that Ethan had to blink twice to fully take it in. Clara responded with a soft nod, signing back, "Of course. I'll be here." The promise hung in the air, a bridge to a new routine, a small but profound beacon of stability and joy. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. For years he had chased perfection: perfect business decisions, perfect investments, perfect appearances. Yet the most meaningful moments in life were never the ones measured in currency or accolades. They were here, in the laughter of a child, in the grace of a young woman offering kindness without expectation, in the warmth of sunlight falling over a shared moment. He glanced around the cafe, noticing how others subtly watched. The elderly couple smiled knowingly, the young mother's eyes softened, and even the barista seemed quieter, touched by the scene. It was as if the ordinary world had paused to honor the extraordinary human connection taking place in their midst. Ethan realized that sometimes, true influence was not about control or power. It was about presence, awareness, and the ability to open oneself to experiences that could not be bought. He knelt down slightly, unsure how to join the exchange without interrupting, and tried to sign slowly, carefully, pointing at Lily and then to himself. I love you. I'm proud of you." His hands trembled slightly, but the sincerity in his gestures could not be mistaken. Lily's eyes softened, and she responded with a string of fluid signs he could only partially interpret. But he understood the essence. "I love you too, Daddy, and I'm happy." Clara watched this quietly, her expression gentle and encouraging. She did not intervene, but her presence was a silent guide, an assurance that Ethan was not alone in his struggle. In that moment, he understood another profound truth. Love required patience, humility, and the willingness to learn continuously, no matter how experienced or accomplished one believed oneself to be. Lily bounced slightly on her toes, signing rapidly to Clara about the next cupcake she wanted, and Ethan felt an unexpected swell of hope. He realized that life could still hold surprises, that his daughter's world could expand in ways he could not have planned, and that he was not powerless after all. He just needed guidance, openness, and a willingness to surrender control. As they shared the cupcakes, laughter, and silent conversation, Ethan began to reflect on his own life. Boardrooms, contracts, and billion-dollar deals had filled his days, but many of those victories had felt hollow, even empty. This small cafe, this shared joy, this effortless connection, was far more valuable. He realized that perhaps he had spent too much time chasing the wrong kind of success, and that the richest achievements were measured not in dollars, but in love, empathy, and shared moments. He glanced again at Clara, noting the subtle shadows in her eyes when she spoke of her younger brother, and the quiet strength she exuded. She had given Lily a gift he could not, yet she had done so without condescension or expectation. She had taught him something vital. The world was not only to be mastered, but to be experienced, to be shared, and to be felt deeply. As the morning light shifted, warming the cafe with golden hues, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. Lily had found joy, Clara had offered understanding, and he had witnessed a bridge being built between two worlds. And yet, he sensed that this was only the beginning. Clara's presence, her kindness, and her mastery of a language he could only hope to learn fully, hinted at possibilities he had never imagined: friendship, guidance, and perhaps even a deeper influence on the way he approached life. fatherhood, and human connection. Lily tugged at his sleeve again, her excitement unabated. She signed quickly, almost pleading, "Can we stay a little longer? Please." Ethan smiled faintly, finally understanding that this simple moment, unplanned and ordinary in the eyes of the world, had become the extraordinary turning point of their morning, and perhaps of their lives. He watched as Clara guided Lily to the table, continuing to sign and interact, and realized that the most profound lessons often came from those we least expect, in moments we do not plan for. His heart swelled with gratitude, his mind open for the first time in years to a lesson he could never have learned from money, power, or experience alone. In the warmth of the cafe, surrounded by ordinary patrons witnessing an extraordinary moment, Ethan Montgomery, a billionaire, a man who thought he had everything, realized that he had found something far richer: connection, understanding, and the possibility of true joy for his daughter and himself. The morning continued, golden and bright, yet etched into Ethan's mind and heart was the knowledge that this day, this meeting, and this extraordinary young woman had changed them forever. The golden sunlight in the cafe had shifted slightly, falling now in soft, warm beams that danced across the polished wood floor. The ordinary morning had slowly transformed into something extraordinary, an unforgettable memory etched into the hearts of those who had witnessed it. Ethan Montgomery sat at a small corner table, his daughter perched beside him, her tiny hands wrapped around a rainbow-sprinkled cupcake. Across from them, Clara continued to sign softly, guiding Lily with a patient, gentle rhythm that seemed effortless. Ethan's eyes never left the scene. His chest was tight, full of emotions he hadn't realized he could feel so intensely: gratitude, awe, humility, and a quiet, profound hope. He had spent decades believing he could control everything, that wealth and influence were the ultimate measures of success. Yet here, in a sunlit cafe, watching his daughter laugh in a language he had yet to master fully, he realized how profoundly wrong he had been. Clara's presence had done more than just communicate. She had opened a door that Ethan had tried to force open with money, power, and meticulous effort. She had offered his daughter inclusion, understanding, and joy, the kind of human connection that no tutor, no technology, and no private lesson could provide. And she had done it without hesitation, without reward, without expectation. Lily's eyes sparkled as she signed quickly, her hands flying with excitement. "Can we come back every day?" "Please, Daddy!" Ethan's lips curved into a small, tender smile. For years, he had chased perfection in business, believing that he needed to provide everything material to protect his daughter. But watching her now, he understood the truth. The richest gifts are not bought, they are shared. Experienced and felt, he looked at Clara, meeting her gaze for the first time without distance or formality. There was something unspoken between them, a recognition that what had just happened was rare, extraordinary, and transformative. Her gentle nod and soft smile acknowledged the connection they now shared, not just with Lily, but with each other. As witnesses and participants in this small miracle, Ethan finally lifted his hands, moving slowly and deliberately as he attempted to sign back to Lily. "I promise. We'll come back, and thank you." His movements were still imperfect, but the sincerity was unmistakable. Lily's face lit up, and she signed rapidly, her tiny hands dancing in the air with joy and relief. Clara joined in, guiding her with subtle encouragement. For a long moment, the three of them existed in a world apart from the cafe, from the city, from everything that normally dictated their lives. The background noises, the hum of conversation, the hiss of espresso machines, the soft clinking of cups, faded into irrelevance. What mattered was here, in this corner, in this sunlit bubble, where understanding and joy flowed freely. Ethan felt a sudden, overwhelming gratitude toward Clara, a recognition that went beyond mere words or gestures. She had given Lily something invaluable, the ability to fully inhabit her world without restriction, the freedom to express herself, and the joy of connection. And in doing so, she had changed Ethan too. He realized that even a life built on control and power could be softened, humanized and enriched by a single act of empathy and care. The cafe patrons, previously quiet observers, began to notice the subtle transformation in Ethan. The man who usually carried himself with the impenetrable composure of a billionaire seemed lighter, softened by something money could never buy. A few exchanged glances, some whispering under their breath, sensing the extraordinary human moment that had unfolded before them. Lily leaned against her father, signing quickly, then pointing toward Clara. "She's amazing!" "I love her." Ethan's chest ached, and he nodded, signing back as best as he could. "I love you too, Lily, and I'm proud of you." His hands trembled slightly, but the love and sincerity radiated clearly. Clara smiled softly, her hands guiding Lily gently, but giving Ethan the space to connect in his imperfect way. A small silence settled over the table, the kind of quiet that feels sacred. Ethan realized in that instant that this day had shifted something fundamental in him. He had been chasing the wrong markers of success for years. Boardrooms, contracts, headlines, none of that mattered compared to the laughter of his daughter, the fluidity of human connection, and the selfless kindness of a stranger. And then, as if to punctuate the lesson, Lily suddenly looked at Ethan with wide, expectant eyes, signing rapidly. "Daddy, can we invite her to our house, please? She can come help me learn more." Ethan's breath caught. He hadn't even considered it. Clara looked at him, her own expression gentle but cautious, hands still moving softly for Lily's sake. Ethan's mind raced. Could he truly invite a stranger into their carefully guarded world? Could he trust her with the one thing he cherished most, his daughter's happiness and safety? Yet as he watched Clara's kind, patient gaze, her effortless fluency, and the way she had already touched Lily's life, he knew the answer. The world he had built on contracts and control had no place here. The rules he had lived by no longer applied. What mattered now was trust, courage, and openness, the kind that could transform ordinary moments into extraordinary lives. Ethan's hands lifted once more, this time with determination. He signed slowly, carefully, yet with confidence. "Yes, you can come. We want you to." Lily clapped her hands together, her joy uncontainable. Clara smiled, a soft, radiant expression that seemed to illuminate the entire cafe. For a moment, father, daughter, and this extraordinary stranger existed in perfect harmony, bound by a connection that defied language, money, and status. And then, as they shared a quiet laugh, the cafe door opened once more. A gust of wind swept in, carrying with it the sounds of the city outside. Ethan glanced up, suddenly aware of the larger world waiting beyond these walls. But for the first time, he did not feel anxious, protective, or controlling. Instead, he felt something entirely new. Hope. Hope that Lily's world could be bigger, brighter, and filled with more joy than he had ever imagined. Hope that he could learn, grow, and participate fully in her life, not as a distant provider, but as a present, loving father. And hope that Clara's presence, her patience, her empathy, her selfless gift, was only the beginning of something extraordinary for all three of them. As the golden sunlight spilled over the table, highlighting the faces of father, daughter, and the young woman who had already changed their lives, Ethan felt a profound shift. He knew this day would be remembered, not for the ordinary cafe or the pastries, but for the extraordinary human connection that had unfolded within its walls. And in that quiet, sunlit corner, a promise lingered, unspoken but understood. This was not the end, but the beginning of a story far greater than any deal, any fortune, or any headline could ever tell. For Ethan Montgomery, billionaire, and his little girl Lily, life had suddenly opened a new door. And as they left the cafe together, laughter and silent joy in tow, the world outside seemed full of possibilities, and the promise of moments even more extraordinary than the one they had just lived.